September 3rd, 1939. London is a city of gas masks and sandbags. But beneath the frantic preparations for falling bombs, a more silent predator is circling the coast. Britain is an island that has forgotten how to feed itself. We import 70% of our calories. 22 million tons of food must cross the Atlantic every year just to keep the population from eating the bark off the trees. Every loaf of bread, every slab of butter, every tin of meat is a target. As the wireless crackles with the voice of Neville Chamberlain, the shadow of the swastika isn't just over Poland, it's over the dinner table. The mechanism of this disaster is a simple, crushing equation of tonnage. For every merchant ship that vanishes beneath the waves, 10,000 families lose their sustenance. The U-boat doesn't need to invade, it only needs to wait. It is a war of attrition where the fatal flaw is the Atlantic Gap, a vast stretch of ocean where no planes can fly and no protection can reach the slow, heavy hulls of the food ships. When the torpedo strikes, there is no cinematic explosion for the people at home. There is only a line through a ledger in a London basement and a tightening of the belt. The experts at the Ministry of Agriculture look at the fallow fields and the empty stables, and they see a mathematical certainty. Starvation by spring. The horses have been drafted to pull artillery. The men, the plowmen, the harvesters, the shepherds have been sent to the front. The English countryside, once the backbone of the nation, is a hollow shell of weeds and unplowed dirt. In the mahogany-paneled rooms of Whitehall, the consensus is cold and brittle. One official, peering through clouds of tobacco smoke, captures the era's hubris perfectly. The English farm is no place for a lady's sensibilities. To send a girl to do the work of a master plowman is to invite a collapse of both the harvest and the woman. We must rely on our stockpiles and pray for the navy. They believe the soil is a man's burden, that the delicate constitution of a shop girl would shatter under the weight of a damp English winter. They treat the feminine spirit as a structural liability, a blind spot in the national defense. To the establishment, a woman is a creature of the domestic sphere, meant for bandages and tea, not the brutal, bone-breaking physics of the earth. But while the generals map out the North Sea and the politicians argue over the price of wheat, the first volunteers are already standing in the gray morning light. They are secretaries from Leeds, debutantes from Chelsea, and seamstresses from the East End. They are the land girls. The process begins with a girl named Margaret. She is 20 years old, and until yesterday, her world was the rhythmic clack-clack of a Remington typewriter. Now, she stands in a drafty recruitment hall, facing a representative of the system, a man whose uniform is as stiff as his prejudices. He looks at her hands. He sees the manicured nails, the soft skin of someone who has never known the bite of a frost-covered spade. He mocks her. He tells her the mud of Devon will swallow her whole before the first frost. But Margaret doesn't blink. She sees what the experts cannot. While they see a problem of manpower, she sees a problem of survival. While the establishment screams in panic about the closing U-boat blockade, these women are already in the dark, holding the silence that will save the kingdom. They are swapping silk for corduroy, and they are about to prove that the most dangerous thing in Britain isn't a Spitfire. It's a woman with a point to prove. But the system is not easily convinced. The farmers, rooted in centuries of patriarchal tradition, watch the first trucks arrive at the fences with crossed arms. They see the land girls as a joke, a government experiment designed to fail. They treat the silence of the fields as a sign that the old ways are the only ways. One farmer in Kent dismisses the warning of the coming famine as a minor logistical hurdle. He believes the weather and the weaker sex are his only enemies. He treats the arrival of the women as a nuisance to be tolerated, not a solution to be embraced. But he has fatally underestimated the gravity of the crisis. It isn't just a labor shortage. It is a total mechanical failure of the old world. While he toasts to the good old days in the local pub, a microscopic reality, the true master of the war, is beginning to unfold. The soil is turning sour from neglect, and the U-boats have just sunk the largest shipment of fertilizer ever to leave New York. The hammer is about to fall, and it doesn't care about his pride. The first winter of the war arrives like a blade. The ground turns to iron. The blockade black box of the British farm is failing. Input. The government demands double the food production. Mechanical failure. There are no men to drive the tractors, and the tractors themselves are temperamental beasts of steel that choke on the cold air like a drowning swimmer. Output. The fields remain gray and barren. The experts are paralyzed. They look at their manuals and find no answers for a world where the horses are gone and the men are in the trenches. They are waiting for a miracle of engineering, for a new fleet of ships that will never come. They do not realize that the miracle is already standing in the mud, wearing an oversized pair of overalls and holding a wrench. Margaret is no longer a typist. She is a ghost in the machine. While the farmers struggle to start the frozen engines, she is the one who remembers the specific fatal flaw of the Fordson tractor, the way the carburetor floods if you pull the choke too hard. She doesn't see a complex machine. She sees a pattern. Because she was an outsider, she sees the farm differently than the experts. While they saw complexity and tradition, she sees a system that needs to be broken, to be fixed. She isn't afraid to get her hands dirty because her pride isn't tied to the way things ought to be. But the resistance is only beginning. The land girls are about to enter a world where the cold isn't their biggest enemy. It's the men they are trying to save. June the 14th, 1941. A muddy ridge in Kent. The morning mist doesn't lift so much as it dissolves into a fine gray drizzle that clings to everything: the wool of the sweaters, the rust on the gates, and the lungs of the thousands of women now standing at the edge of the world they once knew. They arrive in waves. Thousands of shopgirls, secretaries, and debutantes stepping off steam trains into a landscape that feels as alien as the moon. They are swapping silk stockings for heavy corduroy breeches that chafe the skin raw. They are trading the scent of Chanel No. 5 for the pervasive oily stench of diesel and the acidic bite of manure. The system watches them with a smirk. To the rural elite, this isn't a mobilization, it's a masquerade. Consider Evelyn. 6 months ago, she was a window dresser in London, her world defined by the drape of velvet and the precision of a mannequin's pose. Now, she stands before a gate held shut by a man named Arthur, a farmer whose family has tilled this specific patch of Kentish clay since the Napoleonic Wars. Arthur represents the crystallized arrogance of the old guard. He looks at Evelyn's small frame and the way she holds her shovel like a violin bow rather than a weapon, and he lets out a dry, rattling laugh. "The government thinks they can win a war with ribbons," he says, spitting into the slurry at her feet. "That earth don't care about your patriotism, girl. It only cares about muscle. You'll be back in the city by the time the hay is dry, crying for your mother." He doesn't just reject her. He mocks the very idea that her soft history could ever translate to the hard reality of the plow. He prioritizes tradition over the terrifying truth of the shipping ledgers. He believes the status quo is a shield, but Evelyn is not there to play a part. She is the first gear in a revolution he cannot yet see. The tension of the era rests on a fatal flaw in the British agricultural system. It is a Victorian machine trying to fight a mechanical war. The horses are gone, and in their place sits the Fordson tractor, a temperamental 3-ton beast of cast iron that the Ministry of Agriculture has distributed like confetti, assuming that anyone can drive one. The black box of the Fordson is its lethal lack of a differential and its terrifying center of gravity. Input: the operator encounters a steep incline or a hidden stump. The mechanism of death. Because the tractor lacks a heavy front-end weight, the massive torque of the rear wheels doesn't push the machine forward. It pivots the entire frame backward. Output: in less than 2 seconds, the 3-ton iron horse flips, crushing the driver into the mud before they can even reach for the clutch. It is a widowmaker. The experts claim it is too dangerous for women, citing the physical strength required to wrestle the steering. But they are looking through the lens of the past. Evelyn doesn't try to wrestle the machine. Because she spent years as an outsider, a woman in a world of rigid mechanics, she looks at the Fordson not as a horse to be broken, but as a system to be finessed. While the men use brute force to yank the levers, Evelyn listens to the pitch of the engine. She feels the vibration in the soles of her boots. While the experts saw complexity and danger, she sees a rhythm. By July, the miracle begins to take shape. While the ministry panics about the U-boat Happy Time in the Atlantic, these land girls are performing a quiet act of alchemy. They are dragging a 19th century industry into the industrial age. They aren't just replacing the men, they are outperforming them. The ghost in the machine is now visible in every furrow. In the dead of night, while the village sleeps, the land girls are out with hooded tractor lamps, plowing through the blackout. They develop a cognitive bridge, born of their unique backgrounds. The seamstresses apply the precision of a needle to the alignment of the grain rows. The secretaries apply the organizational rigor of a filing cabinet to the rotation of the crops. The statistics begin to scream a truth the establishment wants to ignore. The wheat yields aren't just holding steady, they are shattering records. Britain is being fed by the very demographic the experts claimed would collapse under the weight of a spade. But success breeds a new kind of friction. The more the land girls master the iron horse, the more the system begins to fear them. The farmers like Arthur no longer laugh. Instead, they watch from the shadows of the barns, their faces tight with a growing resentment. They see their monopoly on toughness evaporating. They see a world where the wheel has been taken by hands that were never supposed to touch it. The hubris and the hammer makes its appearance in the late summer heat. The ministry officials, buoyed by the record-breaking harvest, begin to boast. They claim the food problem is solved. They treat the land girl's labor as a temporary flick of a switch, a mechanical fix that can be turned off as easily as it was turned on. They believe they have mastered the crisis, and they begin to plan for the return to normalcy. But they have fatally underestimated the master of the deep. The U-boats aren't gone. They are merely evolving, moving in larger packs, targeting the oil tankers that fuel the very tractors the women are driving. The establishment treats the overflowing granaries as a sign of total victory. They believe the silence of the hungry belly has been bought forever. But it isn't victory. It is the eye of a hurricane. While they toast to the resilient British farmer, the true master of the war, the grinding, indifferent physics of a global blockade, is preparing to remind them that one good harvest does not break a siege. The hammer is the realization that the war will not end in months, but years. And as the grease sinks deeper into the pores of Evelyn's hands, a chilling question begins to circulate in the halls of power. What do we do with these women once they realize they don't need us to lead them? The system had invited the weaker sex into the dirt to save its life, but it never intended for them to stay. October 1945. A quiet railway station in Devon. The air is thick with the scent of unspent coal and the distant muffled ringing of church bells from a village 2 miles away. In London, the fountains in Trafalgar Square are flowing again. The lights have been switched on. The great system is exhaling, celebrating a victory it claims was won by the brilliance of its generals and the sheer weight of its steel. But on this platform, the victory feels like a funeral. Evelyn stands by her wooden trunk. She is wearing her uniform, the green sweater, the corduroy breeches, the felt hat with the badge of the Women's Land Army. It is the skin she has lived in for 4 years. It is a skin stained by the oil of the Fordson and the salt of her own sweat. Then comes the representative of the establishment. He is a clerk from the ministry, clutching a clipboard like a shield. He doesn't look her in the eye. To him, Evelyn is no longer the engine of national survival. She is a line item that needs to be deleted. The uniform, he says, his voice flat and devoid of the gratitude that was so abundant when the U-boats were winning. It remains government property. You are to return the sweater, the breeches, and the greatcoat. You may keep the shoes, if they are deemed to be of no further use to the crown. This is the crystallized arrogance of the peace. The system has formulated a new statement for the new era. Now that the emergency has passed, we must return to the natural order. A woman's place is to support the hearth, not to command the field. Your service was a necessity, not a career. They prioritize the comfort of the old status quo over the truth of the last 5 years. They want the land girl to vanish back into the domestic shadows, to become a fragile shopgirl once again, as if the war was merely a dream. While the soldiers march through London with medals pinned to their chests, the land girls are told to strip. In backyards across England, women are burning their overalls. Not out of shame, but because the system has made it clear you are no longer welcome in the world you saved. If you believe that stories like Evelyn's deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing and leave a like. The bitter victory is not found in the lack of a parade. It is found in the black box of the post-war economy: input. The men return from the front to reclaim their jobs. The mechanical failure. The agricultural system has changed. The land girls didn't just fill a gap. They industrialized the soil. They proved that the fatal flaw of British farming wasn't a lack of men, but a lack of modern mechanical efficiency. Output. The traditional, small-scale, patriarchal farm is dead, replaced by the very industrial model these women perfected. Yet they are the ones barred from the new industry. Evelyn watches the train pull into the station. She is denied the military benefits given to her sisters in the WAF. She is denied the right to keep the badge she wore while the bombs fell. The system treats her sacrifice as a temporary glitch, a deviation from the manual that must now be corrected, while the experts saw the return to the old ways as a victory for tradition. They were actually dismantling the very human spirit that had kept them from starving. They saw the land girl as a spare part useful when the machine was breaking, but an eyesore when it was running smoothly. But the ghost in the machine cannot be so easily erased. Look at the modern English countryside today. The vast, mechanized fields, the precision of the harvest, the deep reliance on the very iron horses that Evelyn mastered. This is her true monument. The experts of 1939 claimed it was impossible. They claimed a woman's sensibilities would fail. Instead, she rewrote the DNA of the earth itself. The cruel irony is that we live in the world they built, yet we have forgotten the builders. We see the rows of golden wheat, and we think of tradition, forgetting that for 5 years, that tradition was a woman with grease under her fingernails and a wrench in her pocket. We are left with a lingering sense of indignation. They didn't deserve her. They didn't deserve the thousands of girls who swapped their youth for the mud so that a nation could eat. Do we see this same hubris in our society today? Do we still treat the invisible agents of our survival as disposable? Do we wait for the next black box failure before we recognize the power of the outsiders standing right in front of us? History suggests we do. We celebrate the noise of the system and ignore the silence of those who actually hold it together. But the dirt remembers. The furrows of Kent and Devon still carry the invisible geometry of the women who refused to break. The war was won in the Atlantic. Yes, it was won in the skies over London, but it was also won in the quiet, freezing hours before dawn by a girl who had never seen a tractor before and who refused to let the engine die. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.